Hello friends, you've stumbled across a short clip from the Daily Switch 2 podcast, which, believe it or not, is a podcast that is about the Switch 2 with new episodes released daily. What will they think of next? So let's talk about those physical retail copies. In my deep dive into all 25 launch titles, I pointed out that out of all of the games physically available, only 2 third-party games are actually on the cartridge. Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition and Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. Both games cost $70, which is pretty steep, more expensive than the expected third-party price of the last generation, but less than the $80 Nintendo is asking for Mario Kart or Tears of the Kingdom. And unlike those games, both Cyberpunk and Rune Factory include lovely packaging, inside and out, color manuals and inserts, and aren't just empty boxes. I mentioned in both my Mario Kart review and the launch game lineups that Cyberpunk Physical Edition really puts Nintendo's own game to shame from a shelf collector value proposition sense. It's a really nice package. Now, I haven't bought it, and I didn't know too much about Rune Factory at the time I was making that video, so in my coverage I brushed over it fairly quickly, just mentioning that the developers should be commended for including the full game on the cartridge. But I had a really cool comment on one of my videos from a user on YouTube called Dieli. If you're listening, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And they pointed out that Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma includes a 31-page full-color manual, quote, because they like their players. Yeah, quite. That's awesome. And by the way, I actually do read and try to respond to every comment that people leave, whether positive or negative. So please do drop a comment. I will try my best to shout at anyone whose information or opinion that leads me to mention something in a future video. In this case, Dieli helped cement the developers and publishers Marvelous as a good company to watch out for, in my mind. And a few days ago, I was compiling a spreadsheet of all forthcoming confirmed games so that I know what to cover and when. And I noticed that in the whole 98-game lineup, there were only 2 more third-party games coming out later this year, which are confirmed to have the full game on the physical cartridge. Daemon X Machina, Titanic Scion, which I'm pretty interested in as it's a sequel to a Switch exclusive that I thought was super stylish and had a lot of potential, and Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, which I'm also very interested in because Story of Seasons is the new name for the true Harvest Moon games. There was some copyright hijinks, and the games that now use the name Harvest Moon aren't the real Harvest Moon, if that makes sense. Many people say that Story of Seasons games are actually the better titles and the ones that you should support. I haven't played Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons games since the SNES original, but I did love that game back in the day. And since I got into both Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley during and after the pandemic, I've been interested in dipping my toes back into the Harvest Moon series and seeing how it progressed nowadays. Of course, quickly learning that the best way to do this is with Story of Seasons, not the new games that are called Harvest Moon. And that's when I noticed both of those games are being published by Marvelous, the same company that published Rune Factory. Basically, out of every game confirmed for the first year of the system's life, the only third-party games confirmed to actually have the full game on the cartridge are Cyberpunk from CD Projekt Red and 3 titles published by Marvelous. So I did a little digging, and I found the co-founder of Marvelous, Ken Berry, being interviewed by Mikhail Madna for RPG Site, and he said that he plans all their games to be on physical ROM cartridges in the West because, and I quote, "This is the right decision for us and our relationship with our fanbase. As a, quote, combination of personal preference and long-term business strategy." He says, If someone like me, who's been in the industry for half of my life, can't tell the difference on which cases contain the physical game or not, I can only imagine how much more difficult it is for a non-industry person, especially if they are purchasing as a gift for someone else. And I never want anyone to have buyer's remorse after purchasing one of our retail games. Thank you. Thank you. And just like that, the company has put itself on my map as perhaps the best third-party publisher on the system, and certainly one that I want to support. And if one or more of the titles they are releasing is interesting to you, I highly recommend that you do too. I was already interested in 2 of the games, and now I will be picking up all 3. And thanks again to Daeli for leaving a comment that helped me make this connection. Really cool stuff, and honestly quite inspiring to me as a game dev and indie publisher. This is the way that I want to be. I've been developing games since the 1980s, but in the 2000s, I basically left the industry completely as the types of games that I liked to make were no longer viable at the time. I like small solo dev or micro team passion projects, 90s aesthetics, pixel art, arcade-style gameplay, experimental and weird and wonderful ideas, unique narratives that say something, basically niche indie titles. For a while there, in the 2000s, that type of game couldn't really exist outside of Java mobile phone titles or Flash browser games, so I moved full-time into the film and TV side of the entertainment industry, rather than becoming just one in thousands of people making models or textures for a yearly Call of Duty game or something. No hate towards those in that industry, but I just personally couldn't get excited about that from a creative standpoint. I grew up in the days of bedroom programmers in the UK, working on the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64 or Amstrad CPC, and where a spotty teenager like me could actually make the next #1 best-selling game before they'd even left school. And many of those people went on to form massive companies in the future that are still around now. Companies like Rare, Codemasters, or even Rockstar. But I got out of the industry until COVID kind of pulled me back in. I wasn't able to work on movies during lockdown for obvious reasons, and a good friend was streaming games every night on Twitch, Stardew Valley, Minecraft, and other games. And as we were hanging out, I was thinking, hey, these are cool, unique passion projects, basically made by one dude. And I got thinking about how there was a renewed market for high-quality 16-bit pixel art style games, and a collector's market for physical small print run editions for the Switch, and how cool it would be to make a game for a Nintendo system. I was specifically hyped for the Switch, as I want to put out physical games with really nice packaging, full color manuals, posters, maps, stickers, maybe even special editions with player's guides, figurines, keyrings, plushies, something that I personally as a collector would want to own and display proudly on my shelf. And it seemed to me that the Switch was the no-brainer system to do this with. Of course, retro collectors, people with a passion for 90s style games, pixel art, beautiful, highly displayable cover art, etc., gravitate towards limited edition Switch physical editions. And I wanted to do that for Switch too as well. But it's hard, man. It's really hard work. Not making the games. That's hard, obviously, but releasing the games for Switch 2 is far harder than it needs to be. Of course, I'm under NDAs, as are all devs, and also I don't want to rip into Nintendo and anger them and perhaps mean my games won't even get approved in the first place because they think I'm a negative person or harming their business. That's the opposite of what I want. I'm one of Nintendo's biggest supporters, and I have been for 3.5 frickin' decades. And the only reason I got back into game dev in the first place is specifically because I wanted to release on the latest Nintendo system. It's just, with Nintendo only offering the 64 gig card variants currently, they are forcing third-party devs to increase their prices, or go the game keycard route, or digital only, or just skip Nintendo entirely and just release on Steam and PlayStation and Xbox, where replication of a Blu-ray is literally a matter of pence. I know this because I do it regularly for movies. And when margins are steep enough for third parties and to sell at a reasonable price, they will be making less royalties than they would on other consoles, including the original Switch. Nintendo is making it even harder to sell decent numbers by nickel and diming the consumer so they have less money to spend, and increasing both the expected price of a game and the minimum manufacturing costs so that a small indie weird niche game like the ones I make have to be sold at a price that might be too much to interest most people. My plan, since starting to develop all of my games, was for them to release digitally for somewhere in the $7 to $15 range, and then have limited print runs of really nice, elaborate physical editions for, say, $20 to $35, depending on how much stuff is included in the packaging. I actually think it's important that digital games should be cheaper than physical games. To me, that's a no-brainer. I don't understand why Nintendo is trying to push the standard of physical and digital being the same price. There's been plenty of people online who've at least rumored that Nintendo insists that you release at the same price. And again, I'm under NDAs. But if so, that's ridiculous. So, yeah, what I think of as reasonable in my head for my games is $7 to $15 per digital, or physical copies for $20 to $35, depending on how much is in the package. And I think that's fairly standard. If you look at Switch 1 games, plenty of the smaller run editions, like, for example, limited run games or super rare games and things like that. Or I'm thinking like, the physical copies of things like Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, for example. They sell for around about $30, which is great for a physical copy. So I would only really want to charge more than that for really elaborate things, like maybe a very small run by a Kickstarter or something like that of maybe $60 or $70 for a big cardboard box with a plushie, a figurine, a full player's game guide inside, that kind of thing. That's been my vision all along and what has inspired me to keep working on my games. Yeah, we can do, if you just want to play the game, you can get it really reasonably digitally. If you want a physical copy for the shelf, there's a reasonable price. And if you really want to go all out and support me, then I'm going to make damn sure that you have some really, really cool stuff. And it's very limited edition, so it's likely to go up in value in the future. That's the kind of prospect that I think is how at least smaller indie games should sell. And on Switch 1, in general, that has been the case. But Nintendo is making it very difficult to do that with Switch 2. I can't get excited about just a digital-only release. I'm a collector, and I know how much that I personally value physical games, so I would be a hypocrite to go the digital-only route. But a $20 to $35 physical release, while perfectly possible on Switch 1, is not just unprofitable, but basically impossible on Switch 2 with the current state of releases. To be fair to Nintendo, game key cards aren't as terrible an idea as many people think. I know, dislike, but hear me out. There are definitely use cases where they 100% make sense. For example, massive AAA titles that are bigger than 64GB or require being permanently installed onto the system anyway to run because of the faster read speeds being necessary. This is the case with many physical games on PS5 and Xbox Series right now already, so Nintendo is somewhat just following the industry trend. Can't say that I like it, but it is the way the industry is going. And as they tend to be the same price for the game keycards as the digital download, in a way, you're getting a box for free. And the option to resell your game, or at least the license to download and play it while servers exist, which is obviously better than just having the download. Game key cards aren't as good as a physical cartridge, but they are better than just a standard download, and they're the same price. So I understand why some people think you shouldn't complain. But I can't help but feel that Nintendo refusing smaller games to have smaller and therefore cheaper capacity cards, while simultaneously increasing prices across the board, both as a third-party developer and equally as a long-term passionate collector who predominantly chose the Switch as their modern system of choice because of the physical collection aspect, I can't help but feel that I'm being screwed over. And I'm far from the only one. If you've listened all the way to the end of this epically long and quite depressing episode, thank you. Please consider dropping a like, subscribe, and maybe come and join our free members area, where I'm doing some fun official Nintendo toy giveaways, as I said, just at cost to me. It's just for fun. As I said earlier, there is no need to financially support. There's a free tier. I just want to grow a nice community of cool people, and you guys listening, liking, and commenting means the world to me and shows that I'm not just talking into the abyss, and getting what you can probably hear is a very sore throat from talking for so long. Well, that was funny / sad / informative / stupid, wasn't it? Feel free to mentally redact to make that make sense with the clip that you just heard. I don't know what it was. I'm just recording a bumper. But if you enjoyed the clip, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more, click subscribe, and you can find all the ways to listen to and support the full daily podcast at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Let's go! Did I sound like I mean that? I do. I really do.